What's going on, guys? Farzin Masugian here with you tonight on the Chief Zone podcast. It is the first podcast of the offseason. Yes, we are here. We're about almost 24 hours removed from that whiplash. That was Super Bowl 59, but hey, it is what it is. Can't be, and nothing can be done about it at this point anymore. And at this point, you just move on and look forward. That's what the Chiefs have done before. This is not their first Super Bowl loss. We've seen the Chiefs come back before. I know that's how a lot of Chiefs fans are taking this right now moving forward. So we'll see what the Chiefs do. Obviously, we'll be talking some offseason here. I know a lot of people want to talk draft. We'll talk a little bit of draft today. In fact, on the docket for today's podcast, more reactions from Kansas City's loss in Super Bowl 59, reacting to some of the other reactions I've seen from Chiefs fans. Also, the dynasty, the GOAT talk, that's been a big conversation today. Xavier Worthy, a lot of people talking about him and the type of game he had in this one. Travis Kelce, his name has been out there about a potential retirement. Will he not? And who could Kansas City keep in free agency? We'll discuss that. Also, my good friend Mark Van Sickle from KCMO Radio, he will join me later on in the podcast, and we will chat it up. I know he's all over the mock drafts. He does this every single offseason. He's into this kind of stuff a lot more than I am. So we're going to talk to Mark later on, kind of pick his brain and go over some of these free agent players from the Chiefs prior to re-signings and whatnot, and also get his reaction a little bit from last night's game. So come on over, relax, let's talk some Chiefs football. I want to let you know this podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. Football season is over, but the NBA, NHL, college basketball season's all still going on right now. Baseball season is starting up very, very soon. And if you guys want to catch any of the action, go to SeatGeek. That's where I go to for my sports ticketing needs. SeatGeek is one of the better websites out there when it comes to purchasing your tickets. You go buy your tickets. If you see a green dot next to that ticket, that means you're paying a good price for it. You see a red color dot, avoid it. That means you're paying more than you really should. The resale price is higher than it should be. So that's what I like about SeatGeek. Keeps you honest, lets you know what you need to know about pricing before you buy your ticket. And speaking of pricing, you want to save $20 from whatever tickets you buy from SeatGeek, whether it's a sporting event, a concert. You can use my promo code Farzine if you're a new SeatGeek customer and save $20 off your first order from SeatGeek. So go to SeatGeek.com. New customers can put in my promo code Farzine and save $20 off their first order from SeatGeek. All right, I see you guys. A lot of you guys coming into the live stream. Appreciate you guys. Hope you're all doing well. Hope some of you guys have recovered from that loss last night. See you guys on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Appreciate you guys joining me live tonight. A lot of things to go over here as the Chiefs, like I said, we're about give or take 24 hours removed from yesterday's loss. The first thing I want to know from all of you guys, how are you feeling? Do you still feel the same, a little better, or maybe worse? From my perspective, I mean, I just kind of looked at that. And listen, I've heard a lot of different things about last night's game. And I think in the moment, people have certain reactions afterwards. You know, once a day or two passes by, people will have a different opinion about things, which is totally normal. As I was watching that, you know, when it was 17-0, I'm like, okay, this game's not really over yet. Once it was 24-0, I realized, okay. Before that, really, when Mahomes threw that second pick, that's when I thought, okay, they're not recovering from this. That second interception, right, setting them up in the red zone already, that's not going to help. That's when I put the game away. And I know there were some Chiefs fans upset with me. Oh, Farzine, how could you just give up on this? I've said many times, this Chiefs team, they have not gotten to where they are just rolling over and quitting. No, they've overcome a lot. But this is not the Houston Texans led by Bill O'Brien where you could overcome a 24-point deficit. I mean, this just wasn't that team. Yes, that was a playoff team, but not the same playoff team ultimately. So that to me is it's one of those things where it's like you got to know when it's done with. And listen, props to anyone that was at the game, spending a shit ton of money to see that kind of performance. And those who were at the P&L district, they stayed into the third quarter. I believe they started to disperse after the midway through the third quarter, somewhere around there. Not really sure exactly when, but I think when you just look at that, I think the disappointing part is the way they just looked at that game, and not that one play decides a game, but obviously, like if a team wins their first game of the season, that's a good start, and that's what you want. That sets the tone for a season, or it can at least. Again, one win does not dictate how the rest of the season's going to go, but if you get off to a good start, it certainly can help set the tone and get you into a rhythm. Where am I going with this? The Chiefs, their first offensive snap was a pass to Juju Smith-Schuster, where Mahomes had that fake and threw off the defense perfectly well and got Juju for a first down. That was the only first down of the entire first half for Kansas City. So when you look at how Kansas City was trying to move forward after that, they abandoned the running game. I think it was 12, 13, 14 games or plays rather. The Chiefs, they didn't run the ball. And then when the game was out of reach, that's when they started running the ball, and it got a little weird. It's like, okay, I don't even understand the logic of the play calling. But hey, that's just kind of the way the Chiefs went with it. I think a lot of people on the Chiefs sidelines knew going into halftime they just were not going to overcome this. Not saying they're a bunch of quitters, but realistically, I mean, with Saquon Barkley not even doing anything in that first half, I mean, they had a massive lead, a 24-0 lead, and they could have just kept using Saquon in the second half. And they kind of did. I mean, I thought Saquon had a great game, but they continued to use Saquon as a decoy, making the Chiefs think they were going to keep running it. But no, they just had the play action, fooled Jalen Watson on that touchdown there, and just continued to grow their lead. They were pretty aggressive with it. Here's some of the reactions I'm seeing from last night's game. The first one I'll start off with. A lot of people asking, why didn't the Chiefs make a switch and put DJ Humphries at left tackle and put Joe Thuney back at left guard? Because the numbers came out today. Joe Thuney had 7 pressures allowed, according to Pro Football Focus, the most on the team. Listen, here's my thing. I bought into the DJ Humphries hype because, he had a good season at one point this year. But to me, it's, the 2 games he played, the Chargers game and the Broncos game. The Broncos game was a great test for DJ Humphries because that was against a Broncos team. Number 1, they were fighting to make the playoffs. And number 2, they have the best defensive front in terms of total sacks on the season. So that was a pretty good test for DJ Humphries to see where he's at. Can he handle going against top tier pass rushers in the playoffs? And he failed at that and didn't play a lot of snaps either. I think it was like 25 snaps because the Chiefs, they had their starters on the field for the first drive of the game, but they didn't use the starters after that. They switched a lot of guys here and there. I mean, Kingsley Suamataia played guard. Like, okay. Like, I mean, that's how unserious they were about that game. But they let DJ Humphries play left tackle a lot, and he just didn't really deliver. So I don't know if DJ Humphries coming in at left tackle and Joe Thuney going to left guard, would that have done anything realistically for the Chiefs? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. Listen, I'm not opposed to having DJ Humphries long-term, or not long-term, but off-season rather. Getting a full off-season, that can help. Maybe not for every player. You guys know Eddie Law. He's been on this podcast before. He's a huge Arizona Cardinals fan, and he's never really been a big fan of DJ Humphries. Just felt like he was always a liability for Arizona. I mean, I trust his football knowledge for sure. I mean, he's only had 1 Pro Bowl season. It's not like this guy was Orlando Pace per se. So I don't know. Here's what I do know is that the Chiefs have gotten the left tackle position wrong for a very long time. I know 2013, there weren't a lot of great options. I mean, oddly enough, you had Travis Kelce and DeAndre Hopkins in that same draft class, obviously, in like what I know the media likes to do, redo mock drafts, and Kelce for sure would be the number 1 pick in that draft class, followed by DeAndre Hopkins, who are both on the Chiefs teammates together here. Kelce ended up getting drafted by the Chiefs that year, but not until the third round. So they had Eric Fisher and then moved him around. He got injured. They decided to cut him. They go and trade for Orlando Brown. He doesn't do really well. They let him go after 2 seasons. And then they bring in Donovan Smith. He's not good. Wanye Morris isn't playing great. Kingsley Suamata-Eo was a disappointment this year. Maybe they give him a second chance, but you can't really just rely on him. You got to have some sort of a viable option there. You just can't. Patrick Mahomes has not had an all-pro type of left tackle his entire time in Kansas City. I know Eric Fisher was a Pro Bowler at one point, but I don't think Eric Fisher, and listen, you guys know my opinion. I'm not too big on the Pro Bowl. It's a popularity contest at the end of the day, but Eric Fisher's never been an all-pro. So take that for what you will. I just feel like this is one of those situations where it's like, listen, yeah, you've been to the big game 3 years in a row with bad left tackle, both left and right tackle play. But that's never the ideal way of going about it. Kansas City's got to find a way to put 5 good offensive linemen on the field. You have to. Otherwise, what's the point of having a franchise quarterback like Patrick Mahomes? Sure, he's done some things where he's made defenders miss and getting away from pressure at times. Didn't do much of that yesterday or any at all. But it was just a really brutal showing for the offensive line. And anyway, listen, I don't want to put it all on the offensive line because there were times where the offensive line was good. And Mahomes just, those 2 interceptions, that was not bad offensive line play. That was not. And that's something where he has to bear the responsibility, which he did. But that's one of those situations where it's like, you know, if you're Patrick Mahomes, you got to take advantage of the good pass blocking when it's there, because it's not always been there for him. I get that, but I don't know. You can't really. Am I ready for more snow? Hell no. Hell no. That's especially in Overland Park where they don't clear the snow, and that's where I am a lot of the times. Hell no to that. But it was just frustrating to watch. What do the Chiefs do with their offensive line? They've got a lot of things to figure out. Obviously, Trey Smith, one of the guys they've got to figure out contract-wise. So we'll see what happens there, and we'll talk about that a little more later on. Another thing I'm hearing a lot of people say, Matt Nagy. I'm just telling you guys right now, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but it doesn't really matter if I do or not. Matt Nagy's staying. I know no Chiefs fan wants to hear that. That is very disappointing to hear, but he's not going nowhere. Number one, he's got a really close connection to Patrick Mahomes, and I don't agree with this. I've said this many times. I know Patrick Mahomes he's had some say, I guess, in some of the draft choices, because Brett Veach has credited Mahomes for wanting them to draft. Who was it? Dorian O'Daniel, which I don't even know. I couldn't even recall one play from Dorian O'Daniel. But you see this with superstar athletes, where whether it's Brady, LeBron, Mahomes, athletes who have a say in some decisions within the organization. And I don't agree with that. You have a general manager for a reason. You have a head coach for a reason. You have an owner for a reason. Let the players beat the players and let the front office guys do their thing. But I just think that when you're Andy Reid, look, if Andy Reid were to be asked, why is Matt Nagy still on the staff? His response would be, we've made the Super Bowls both years. Nagy's the offensive coordinator. I know that's not an answer any Chiefs fan wants to hear, but that's the type of answer he will give you. Bob Sutton, I mean, sure, they reached the AFC Championship game, but they felt the need to make that move because the defense was a liability all year. And I think the numbers certainly show it just from looking at that alone. But this is one of those situations where it's like Kansas City's got to figure it out, because there is no hiding from the fact that when you look at Mahomes' numbers under Eric Bieniemy and under Matt Nagy, they're very different. And I know Andy Reid, as far as we know, has been the primary play caller, but the offensive coordinator still has some responsibility in making sure this offense operates the way it should. I've always said the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs under Andy Reid, they're enforcers. You don't see them calling plays, but their responsibility is to make sure things go the way they're supposed to go. And Eric Bieniemy did a great job of that. Matt Nagy, and the 2 seasons he's been the offensive coordinator, there have been a lot of discussions about the Chiefs offense and how they're not playing as well as they should. And Patrick Mahomes' first year without Tyreek Hill, who were his wide receivers? It was Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Sky Moore was a rookie that year. They brought in Kadarius Toney from the Giants. Patrick Mahomes won MVP that year. And that was Eric Bieniemy's last season with the Chiefs. And then Eric Bieniemy goes, well, you have almost the same wide receivers. The only difference is Juju left and you drafted Rashee Rice. And the drops are just at an all-time high with the wide receivers. Now, they ended up winning the Super Bowl, crazy enough, but I mean, that's no accident. It's really not. I know one last thing I'll get out of here before we bring in Mark Van Sickle from KCMO Radio. I know a lot of people are talking about the dynasty talk, the GOAT talk. I think the Chiefs are still a dynasty. One Super Bowl loss is not, removing them from the dynasty conversation. They've won 3 Super Bowls in a short amount of time. They've been to 5 in 6 seasons, 5 Super Bowls in 6 seasons, winning 3 of them. I mean, that's still dynasty material right there. As far as the GOAT conversation goes, I did see Chris Harris, the former Denver Broncos All-Pro and also a former Kansas Jayhawk, and obviously what a phenomenal career for him, going from undrafted to being underrated to being the best cornerback in the NFL during a short period of time when he played. He tweeted kind of questioning and criticizing the people who are writing off Mahomes from the GOAT talk. I mean, listen, I think when it's all said and done, Patrick Mahomes is going to be the second best quarterback of all time. And listen, that's okay. Everyone wants to be the best. I get that. Sometimes you're just not going to be able to surpass Tom Brady, who played, 50 years and went to 10 Super Bowls. Not everyone's going to be able to replicate that kind of success, and that's okay. What Patrick Mahomes has still done in his career is leaps and bounds better than what a lot of other quarterbacks have accomplished. I mean, look at how many championships he's won already. He's won 3. That's more than Peyton Manning. That's more than Drew Brees. That's more than Aaron Rodgers. What was Troy Aikman's little tweet there a while back when Patrick Mahomes had 33% of Troy Aikman's touchdown passes very early in his career? He said, talk to me when he has 33%. Well, he has the same amount of Super Bowl wins as Troy Aikman does. Another Hall of Famer there. So I think at the end of the day, yeah, and I'm guilty of this as well, I think a lot of us got caught up in the GOAT conversation, and certainly last night's game does not help Patrick Mahomes' case at all. That's okay. I mean, look, a loss is a loss. It's over with. No one can do anything about it. But Patrick Mahomes, I mean, is still one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Even if he were to retire today, a lot of people are saying he is the most talented player of all time, just maybe not the outright number 1 best, and I would agree with that. Then listen, it's still early in his career, but it's not necessarily too early. I mean, he's 29 years old. He's going to turn 30 in September, early on next season. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is still one of the top tier quarterbacks in NFL history, and anyone who says otherwise, I don't even know, we're obviously not looking at the same data nor watching the same games. I mean, he's a 3-time Super Bowl MVP, and I believe that's tied second or third most in NFL history. So, I mean, let's slow down a little bit here. Yeah, he had a bad game, and we certainly covered that, but he's still, at the end of the day, one of the best players of all time. So let's chill out a little bit on the whole overrated bust thing. I heard this sports talk radio moron from Philly on one of the national radio shows, and I can't remember his name, talking about how he covered Andy Reid for 14 years, and Andy Reid's not that charming and funny like in the commercials because I covered him for 14 years. And I didn't know who this guy was, but I went and looked at his social media. Dude only had 3,000 followers. I mean, I don't know what kind of a radio host you really are in a big market like Philly, but evidently he thinks Andy Reid's overrated and all of that. I mean, listen, it took Andy Reid a long time to get his first ring, but he finally got his guy. Didn't have that in Philly. Still should have won a Super Bowl in Philly. I've said that before. But he's gotten to so many championships now. So I don't know. I always think that conversation is interesting from Philly fan. How come they didn't beat Andy Reid a couple of years ago? I mean, Andy Reid, I think, got off to like a 4-0 start record wise against the Eagles since joining the Chiefs. So come on. All right. There are some other things we'll cover here, but for right now, let's go ahead and bring in Mark Van Sickle from KCMO Radio. Mark, thank you for joining me tonight. I'll be honest, I have not had a chance to listen to Pete and Kevin over at KCMO Radio. I'll probably do that after this show because I know I'm sure they had some reactions to this one. Obviously, very disappointing the way it all turned out. I'm just curious from your perspective. How are you feeling looking back at last night, 24 hours removed from it?
Yeah, it was just kind of a flashback to the Bucs Super Bowl. You know, it's like you're sitting there in disbelief. Like, what is happening right now? Why aren't they making adjustments? Why aren't you running the ball? You know, there's all these things that's running through your head. And I was actually at a Super Bowl party last night. That's the first time I've been to a Super Bowl party since the Chiefs have been on this run. And I don't like being at a Super Bowl. I'm not going to a Super Bowl party again next year. Just kidding. It was fun. It was a good time. I love the family that we went over to hang out with. But yeah, I was just like, man, it's probably best if I stay at home and watch, you know, so I can walk in. But man, yeah, it was just like one thing after another. And then once you start seeing the turnovers, when Mahomes threw the pick six, it was like, all right, it's like when you're playing PlayStation or Xbox, you just want to hit the reset button. And you can't do that on a real life Super Bowl. So I'm sure Mahomes would have liked to have done that too.
Yeah. You know, I'm just looking at that, and I think my biggest question after the game, I pose this question. I'm like, how do you look like that? I mean, we make such a big deal about Andy Reid coming off a bye, and I mean, listen, they were coming off a bye as well, but still, like, it's always a big deal about Andy Reid coming off a bye and how successful he is at that in his coaching career. The Chiefs just looked completely unprepared in that one.
Yeah, that's what was mind-boggling. They come out and the entire I know the script kind of flipped a little bit because they were down early, but Kareem Hunt had 3 carries.
Yeah.
Isaiah Pacheco had 3 carries. P. Ryan doesn't get a ton of carries, but he had 1 carry. It was like, what was when they are rushing the passer with just 4 guys, they didn't send 1 blitz the entire game, and you're not running the ball. You're not trying to get the ball out quickly like we've seen them do before this season. It's like I was just dumbfounded by it. I didn't know what to say because you've seen them play against defenses like this before, and they're able to make it work. This time, for whatever reason, they just couldn't do it.
Yeah, it was kind of it was rough to watch. You know, I covered this before you hopped on here. A lot of Chiefs fans this morning and last night were talking about, number one, why didn't we put DJ Humphries in? Number two, why are the Chiefs keeping Matt Nagy? And look, the DJ Humphries one, I mean, listen, he had 2 bad games, but I wanted to focus more on the Matt Nagy one with you because, look, Andy Reid's got a good relationship with Matt Nagy. You know who else does? Patrick Mahomes. And I don't agree with superstar athletes, whether it's Mahomes, Brady, LeBron, to have a say in these kinds of things because they're players. And I get they're top tier players, but they're still players, not decision makers. And I think Nagy's connection to Mahomes is a huge reason why they'll never move on from him unless he's ever offered a head coaching job again.
Yeah, because he's not going to move laterally to go as an offensive coordinator somewhere else, or going to take a lesser job as a quarterback's coach somewhere else. So he's the offensive coordinator for the 3-time defending AFC champions now. He's not leaving unless it's for a head coaching job. I don't think he's going to try to go be a college coach.
Yeah.
Like Bieniemy tried to do that for a little bit. But, I mean, yeah, at this point, I mean, Andy Reid's very loyal, like you said. So I don't see them moving on from him. If there was somebody out there that they could bring in, I think we might have talked about it last time. I was like, I like Cliff Kingsbury. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you mentioned that.
I don't know if that would be a thing where Andy would bring him in. He's not one of his guys or whatever, but yeah, it seems like there's always Andy is very loyal. He has his tree, he has his guys that he likes, but if it's not working, we've seen it happen with the defensive coordinator before. We've seen him move on from the defensive coordinator, even though he didn't want to, obviously.
Yeah.
He saw that's what needed to be done to get over the hump, to get to the Super Bowl, and he made it happen. Now, they were in the Super Bowl this year, so I don't know if he would make a drastic change like that because of a Super Bowl loss.
Yeah, see, that's the other thing, too. It's like, and I said this before, if you were to ask Andy, hey, Andy, why is Nagy still in the staff? He'll tell you the 2 seasons he's been the offensive coordinator, we've reached the Super Bowl, winning one of them and losing the other one. So it's like, that's just kind of the way Andy goes about things. I don't know, though. I mean, there's a lot of truth to the numbers when you look at Mahomes under Bieniemy and under Nagy. I don't get it. I just don't. But that's just kind of the way it is right now with the Chiefs and the offense.
Did you happen to see the article earlier this week about how they call the plays? It was in the Kansas City Star.
I have not. No, I don't get the physical paper anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I know when you go on their website to try to read something, you have to pay for it, and I'm not doing that. But
no, don't do it. I can fill you in quickly.
Yeah, please.
So it was a good article, but basically the long story is Andy Reid has the play calls. He's the one that says what play they're going to do. He tells Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy then relays that play call to Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes relays that call to the huddle. So that's the process they've always done. Andy Reid's done that as long as he's been a head coach. He's done it in Philly. He's done it every year he's been in Kansas City. So they have like a phone tag type of thing that's going on. So Andy Reid has the play call ready to go. He gives it to the offensive coordinator. Then the offensive coordinator relays it in. So Matt Nagy's not calling plays. What he does is he helps get the play in. So he has an important job. But during the week, that's when there could be some difference between Bieniemy and Nagy. When they do a little bit of the game planning with Andy Reid, that's when there could be a difference between those two or another coordinator that would come in.
Well, I remember on Tyreek Hill's podcast, his first offseason with the Dolphins, he started that podcast up. And you remember that Sunday night football game where the Bills just destroyed the Chiefs? And that was the same night where the thing that every Chiefs fan remembers about that is where X Factor got knocked out by his good old friend Red Extreme.
Yes.
That game, I'm just trying to make it clear which game I'm referring to because they played them 100 times.
Yeah.
But in that game, obviously the Chiefs just got whooped in that one. And Tyreek Hill shared a story that during practice all week, Bieniemy was just lashing out at his players during warm-ups, during drills, saying, you let Buffalo do that to you in front of the home crowd. Like, that's the kind of thing that he has always done to just hold the players accountable and let them know what they did. The performance was not okay, and they've got to fix that. And the idea is that Nagy's not doing that kind of thing. He's not holding guys accountable.
He's more the buddy type coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can totally see that when you look at the parade, when they're riding on the floats, Nagy's riding with the quarterbacks and having beers with them. So it's like, you can tell they're friends, but at the same time, when you're a parent, you don't want to be the best friend of your child. You have to be the parent. So there's a little of that you got to look at.
Well, even in the first year without Tyreek Hill, 2022, that was also the same year Nagy came back to Kansas City, but he started as a quarterbacks coach, and his son played high school football here, and I believe he's moving on to KU to continue playing football. Mahomes and Brittany, I mean, they were there Friday nights with Nagy. I don't know every single Friday night. I know this year was a big year for Nagy's son, his senior year, and Mahomes was spotted at a lot of games with Nagy. So I mean they've spent a lot of time together off the field for sure. So I suppose that's a big reason why you're seeing Nagy stay in Kansas City. I did want to ask you about Xavier Worthy. There were very, very, very few things that were good about last night. Run defense was one of them. Unfortunately, as bad as Saquon Barkley was, the 21 other players on offense and defense for the Eagles were just great. But a lot of people in Kansas City are kind of leaning on Xavier Worthy's performance. I mean, listen, I get like you have to play all 60 minutes. You can't just, do a mercy or anything like that. You got to still play, and Xavier Worthy still wanted to show up and play. So I'm not going to shame that. I'm also not going to get too excited over this because it was a blowout and Philly was just kind of playing soft prevent defense, not really doing anything aggressively or too hard. What do you take from Xavier Worthy's performance, and how seriously can we really be excited about that kind of thing?
I think you can be excited about it for one. It didn't seem like they were pushing as hard on the rush, maybe on that final touchdown. But that final touchdown, the deep pass from Mahomes to Worthy, that's what we've been hoping for all season.
That's what I was saying. I'm like, wait a minute. We've struggled with the deep pass, and suddenly it's working during a blowout loss in a Super Bowl? Like, great timing.
They finally did it. They finally went deep to Worthy, connected on a touchdown. I think that was the first time. He's had some, shorter passes to Worthy that have broken for a touchdown. I don't think he'd had 150 yards in the air for a touchdown. I think that was the first.
I think the only one was the Chargers game, the same one where Rice got injured.
Oh, yeah, he did get that long one.
But that was the only one.
And there was another one that was close where Worthy stepped out of bounds on accident or whatever. But they've tried it a few times, but they finally hit it in the Super Bowl. And so that's something definitely to be excited about when you have him as a deep threat. You have Rashee Rice back next year, whenever he's not suspended or whatever, when he's roaming the middle of the field.
Yeah.
We don't know about Kelce. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Noah Gray is a fine tight end too. He can help out in the middle of the field. But yeah, I mean, Worthy with his speed, with his ability to track the ball, maybe the Eagles weren't rushing quite as hard at that point. So Mahomes was able to actually throw the ball.
Yeah.
Which helps. But they were still doubling Worthy on that play. So, I mean, to get the ball to Worthy in double coverage and for Worthy to make that great catch, that got me actually excited. Like, that was the only play of the game offensively that really just fired me up.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was already in the studio setting up. I have YouTube TV on my phone, so I'm just watching that, and I'm like, oh, shit, he just threw a missile. And he caught it, too. So that was
by the way,
go ahead.
If you're on DraftKings at all, that play got Xavier Worthy, the king of the end zone, which was the longest touchdown of the game. So anybody that bet Xavier Worthy to get a touchdown got a $47 bonus bet. Thank you. Thank you, Worthy. Thank you.
There's another positive from the game. I like this. Let's just talk about the positives. By the way, in the event the Chiefs pulled out with a win, I mean, there would not be a parade. I don't know. It's like we're about to get a massive snowstorm.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe not as massive as the one before, but it's coming.
I think if they would have won, they would have moved it up to Tuesday, so it would have been tomorrow.
Yeah, you would have had to. Just
because, Wednesday is supposed to be 4 to 6 inches of snow, and then Thursday would have been cleanup.
Yeah. Plus, like, I know some people are like, well, why don't they just push it back? No, the players, they want to go home. I mean, it's always a long season when you play this late, so they just want to get the hell out and go home, which is understandable. I mean, I would too. But they'll be able to do that today or tomorrow, whenever their last day. I know. I don't know if you get all the media releases from the Chiefs. Did they announce when they're? I don't know what that. There's a specific name they call it. It's like the final day, a cleanup day, I guess, where they give the media an opportunity to meet with players one last time. Are they doing that this week?
I would imagine that would probably be tomorrow, but I'm not sure. I don't have the release on that.
Okay, fair enough. All right, just figured I'd ask. You mentioned Travis Kelce. Let's get into him. Listen, he's a phenomenal player. No question about it. I think even this year and last year, where his numbers are not as big, no 1,000 yards for him. he's still one of the better tight ends. You're not going to find 5 or 6 more tight ends that had more yards and receptions than he did. But he's on a decline. I mean, the drops that's been a thing with him his entire career. Listen, there's a rumor out there that he was I guess a little befuddled because of the booing that Taylor Swift received. I don't know.
That's why he played bad in the second half.
Allegedly. If you think Barstool Sports is a reputable source, but I mean, look, I think he was just bummed out because there's a realistic possibility this could have been his final game. What do you think? What do you think Travis Kelce does?
Yeah, I'm an avid listener of their podcast. Every Wednesday, I have a lot going on, but I try to listen to at least half of it the day it comes out, and then the next half the next day or whatever. But he's talked about it on their podcast. You know, he said he's going to take time after the season and think about things. So that's not really a secret. But I mean, going back and seeing how he did this year, I mean, it wasn't his best season, obviously, but he still had those games where he'd get after it and he'd have a 10 catch game, you know. I don't know. Did he have 100-yard? I think he had 100-yard game this year, maybe.
He had the Tampa Bay game. That was exactly 100 yards. And then the Houston Texans game, he had 117.
Okay. So he had a couple hundred. So yeah, I mean, he can still do it. And next year, when you have Rashee Rice back, when you have Xavier Worthy, how he played the second half of the season.
Yeah.
I think he's going to think about it and be like, you know what? We can go back and we can win one more in my last year and come back and try for another one.
By the way, Kay says NFL Check Day. I think that sounds about right. That's the title, and it says it's going to be on Tuesday. So, yeah, I'm curious. I mean, obviously, you know, a couple days, a day and a half after the game, maybe we'll get some different responses, answers to things. The media has one last chance to ask the questions that they probably need to ask that they didn't have an opportunity to ask on Sunday after the game. So we'll see. I know you're big into all the offseason stuff. I do want to get into your mock draft in a moment. Before we get into that, I do want to look at the list of free agents because it is long. It is big. Listen, the Chiefs have had some difficult off seasons before. This might be the longest list of pending free agents I've seen in quite some time. I know the list is kind of small. Let me zoom in a little bit for those who can't see. Mark, can you see that on your end?
Yeah.
Okay. So, boy, I mean, there are a lot of guys on this list. Hopkins, Rita Minhu, Hollywood, DJ Humphries, Joshua Uche, Turk Wharton, Carson Wentz, Derek Nottie, Justin Watson. I guess I might as well go through the list. Samaje Perine, Nick Bolton, James Winchester, who's been here forever, Mike Pennell, Juju, Kareem, McCole Hardman. And then we can kind of get down the line to players who we don't really talk about much, but you have Jody Fortson on this list, Peyton Hendershot, Jack Cochran, Trey Smith is on here as well. He's low because he was a 6th-round pick. That's why the money is low. Matt Ariza, yeah. Oh, he's definitely hitting the money. He's hitting the bank. Matt Ariza is on here. Nazeeh Johnson, who's part of the 2022 draft class. I know the Chiefs have $11 million in cap space. They're obviously going to rework some deals and create them into signing bonuses. That's already something they'll look into that. But just from looking at this list, it's a very long list. If I said you can prioritize 3 players, who are they?
Ooh, 3 players. That's tough. That is tough.
There's so many. I think number 1 has to be Trey Smith. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, I think Trey Smith, you don't want to break up a good part of the line. Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey are best friends from what I can tell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
On and off the field. So, yeah, I think I would have to go Trey Smith number 1, probably Nick Bolton number 2, I would say. And this might be a little bit of an outside pick, but Hollywood Brown, probably for me, number 3.
Okay, I knew you were going to pick one of the 2 wide receivers between Hopkins and Brown. I would say Trey Smith, Hollywood Brown, and I am looking at that defensive line. I don't want to lose Treshaun Wharton. He is heavily underrated. They were able to keep the entire defensive line. I mean, they got Mike Dana for a fairly good deal. Charles Omenihu, I mean, he was still under contract, but he hasn't done much lately. So you might be able to keep him for a cheap price unless someone else out there is willing to pay him a lot more for his services. And like I said, I know it was kind of an unfair question. 3 guys. It is hard to make it just 3, but boy, this might be Brett Veach's most difficult offseason, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. This is a big one. And you look, I think as long as James Winchester doesn't want to retire, I think he's going to come back. I don't think that's like a huge number. The long snapper is not a huge hit against the cap. What is that? $1.5 million or so?
Yeah,
maybe
probably.
So I think as long as he still wants to play, I think they'll bring him back. I don't think that'll be a huge hurdle there. But yeah, the Omenihu, Wharton, Noddy. I mean, maybe you can bring back 2 of the 3, but if they're looking for a bigger payday, another team might jump in on there. So I don't think they're going to just come back to the Chiefs for a discount at this point. They have a couple rings. They want to get their money. And that's what Trey Smith. That's the same thing with Trey Smith. If the Chiefs don't offer him a competitive deal, he's going to go somewhere like the Bears or something like that. So they're going to have to give him at least $20 million per season.
Yeah, a lot of people are mentioning Justin Reed. Justin Reed has really been, in my opinion, an underappreciated player here. I say that a lot about him. And listen, I know this year especially, but this defense, there's no individual that thrives statistically. And where I'm going with this is kind of Chris Jones. I mean, he obviously became the highest paid defensive tackle in NFL history. And he did. I think he led all defensive tackles and sacks. I'm sorry, not sacks. Pressures. But he had that talk last year about wanting to be defensive player of the year and get 20 sacks. I mean, the 20 sacks, that's a really tall order. Didn't even come close to it. I think for what you're paying him, you got to get more production out of him. And listen, the Chiefs have been very close in his defense. But close is not going to cut it. You get all those pressures, and they're able to find someone wide open. Bryce Young was able to do that against Kansas City's defense.
Yeah, that was rough. Justin Reed, he's one of the leaders on that defense. You can use him on special teams as a kicker if you need him to.
Yeah.
Special teams, he almost blocked some extra points or field goals this year. So, I mean, Justin Reed's important. If he's going to get paid higher somewhere else, I think, again, at this point, he's won a couple Super Bowls, so it's just like I don't know. So I don't think these guys are taking the hometown discount.
No.
So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Veach to re-sign these guys.
And here's a weird part too. It's like the Chiefs are making some of these guys the highest paid players at their positions in history. Like Butker's the highest paid kicker. Okay, that's not terrible because he's just a kicker. But then you make Creed Humphrey the highest paid center in NFL history. Jones is the highest paid defensive tackle in NFL history. You gave Kelce a pay raise last offseason. You can't make. I mean, Trey Smith's gonna hit the bank very soon. Nick Bolton's probably due for a big payday. You just can't make all of these guys the highest paid players in NFL history at their position. It just doesn't work like that. So realistically speaking, there are some guys who played their last game with the Chiefs. Unfortunately, it's just who do you prioritize and who are you able to bring back for the right price? That is what Brett Veach has to figure out this offseason. And whoever you're not able to bring back, it's very important that you have another successful draft. And Kansas City's done a good job in the draft lately, but that becomes more important this year where I said for a long time, you're going to have a lot of turnover this offseason.
Yeah, you got to hit like you did in the 2022 draft. You got to get after it and make sure that you can use the picks wisely. If you want to try to trade up, you got that extra 3rd round pick from the Titans this year. So, and the Titans were the worst team in the NFL. So you have a really high 3rd round draft pick.
Yes.
So that's very helpful if you want to use that pick to either fill in the depth or if you want to use that pick maybe along with your first round pick to try to move up in the first round to try to get, maybe if a left tackle starts to slide or something like that.
Yeah,
that might be a chance to move up.
Well, speaking of the drafts, I know you're pretty big on your mock drafts. I know you're into that stuff every offseason. I'm curious. I know you had a chance to play with the Pro Football Focus mock draft there. What did you come away with when you were doing that?
Yeah, so with this one, I usually just try to look for position of need and best available. So if I see somebody that I really think that the Chiefs could use at that position and they're at the top of the board, I'll take them. I try not to reach too much. Maybe I'll make a trade here and there, but I try not to go too crazy. And on these mock drafts, they don't let you just, trade willy-nilly. You have to have an even trade. So if you're going to make a trade, it has to be realistic. So
and let me just fill in something there for those who aren't familiar. If you go to Pro Football Focus on their mock, just Google PFF mock draft. I think you have to be a member to do like the full 7-round mock draft, but they basically have a mock draft simulator. And obviously with workouts, interviews, combines, all these things, they'll update as the offseason goes. But you can basically do a mock draft. You can do it for as many teams as you want or just one team, but it'll simulate for the other teams that you don't pick, and you can pick for the Chiefs or whoever you want to pick for. So it does give you as much as, they believe could be realistic, and they'll, make it a little random because we see that sometimes in the draft, but that's basically what you were working with. You can also do trades on there.
Yes. And mock draft database is another one that I use. So I've used both of those. So that's, you can do a 7-round mock there. You can do trades. It's just, all dependent on what you want to do. Some people just want to do a 1st-round mock and see how it falls. So
yeah,
I like to go all 7 just because I'm a wacko. I'm a crazy man, but.
So you went with the defensive lineman from Michigan. I know they have a couple of good defensive linemen coming out of Michigan this year.
Yeah, I went with Kenneth Grant. He fell to me at 31, and he's supposed to be around mid-20s pick. So he fell, and all the top offensive, left tackles at least were gone. There was some right tackles sitting there, but at this point, I think you need a left tackle over a right tackle. So I saw Kenneth Grant sitting there from Michigan. I thought, you know what? This guy could wreck some havoc in the middle of the defense. So him and Chris Jones together, like we were talking about, Nadi might not be here. Omenahue might not be here. So they're going to have a hole to fill. He can be a rotational guy if you need him to be. So Kenneth Grant, that was, there we go.
Yeah, you have Kenneth Grant there. And then with your 2nd-round pick, that's when you went offensive line. And I asked you earlier why. I guess there weren't a lot of good offensive linemen available when you were doing that simulator mock draft at 31.
Yeah, I think there's 3 left tackles that could go in the 1st round. Wyatt Milne, who I took in the 2nd round, he could slide up to the end of the 1st by the time, we get to April. But when I saw him, he was supposed to go around 50-something. And so as he kept sliding and sliding, I'm like, you know what? I might actually get the guy that I thought about taking at the end of the 1st round. And he slid all the way to me. So he was the best left tackle available. He started, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think he started 3 consecutive years at left tackle for West Virginia. So he has a lot of experience. And he's a guy that I would not mind the Chiefs taking to compete for that left tackle spot.
Yeah, they definitely need to bring someone in here. Maybe someone more proven. I'm not sure. They got to figure it out. They haven't been able to, but they've got to figure out this offseason. I do want to, the last one I'll touch on here is Caleb Johnson, the running back you got from Iowa. I've seen some people say the KU guy, Devin Neal, he might be available in the 3rd or the 4th round. I remember KU had a running back several years ago, Puka Williams. Remember Puka Williams?
Oh, yeah.
I was really hoping he would play under Andy Reid's offense, but I don't even know what ended up happening with Puka Williams. But I'm intrigued by the running back in the 3rd round there. Obviously, that's the one from the Titans.
Yes.
What do you think? Because obviously, if they do this, that probably spells the end of Kareem Hunt in his second stint with the Chiefs.
Yeah, so I actually traded back just a few spots. I had picked 66 from the Titans, and I just moved back 3 spots because I thought Caleb Johnson might still be there. I was eyeing Caleb Johnson the whole time, hoping he would still be there at 69. But Caleb Johnson, in my opinion, is the second best running back in this draft, behind Genty from Boise State. I think Genty's the number 1, but I think Caleb Johnson is number 2. If you look at his stats from Iowa the last couple of years, I think he had a touchdown in every game this season, a rushing touchdown in every game this season. He was close to 20 touchdowns. I don't know if he got to 20 touchdowns or not, but he's just a beast. He can be a receiving running back. He's an every down running back. First, second, third down. He can pick up he's from a pro scheme in Iowa. Iowa's a NFL machine. They pump guys out left and right, offensive linemen, obviously tight ends. But they have some really good running backs as well. Caleb Johnson, in my opinion, the second best running back. And to get him in the 3rd round after a trade down, I feel like that'd be a great spot for him. And then he can compete for the starting job with Isaiah Pacheco, who's dealt with some injuries, obviously, since he's come into the league. So you need to have 2 good running backs to be able to compete and to be able to work a full season together. So I think Caleb Johnson in this offense would be really solid.
Who is that big running back or fullback from Arizona State? When he was like leading the charge against Texas?
Cam Scatterbo.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were talking about when that game was going on. A lot of Chiefs fans were like, "Hey, I want that guy in Kansas City." Because here's my thing: the Chiefs struggle so much with those short yardage situations. Not just this year; that's been an issue for a couple of years now. And it doesn't matter who they use. I mean, Kareem Hunt, I felt like has been the best at it. But I suppose you don't want to have you don't want to switch running backs for those situations. There, you want to have someone that can kind of be a jack of all trades, excuse me. And I don't know whether it is Devin Neal or the running back you had on yours, Caleb Johnson or Cam Scatterbo. They've got to figure it out because there has been some inconsistency at that running back position. And I think if you have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, you want to be able to, take advantage of his strengths as a passer, but also open up the running game because that'll help create that balance on offense. And we just haven't seen much of that since he's been here.
Cam Scatterbo went at the end of the 2nd round in this mock. And I believe Devin Neal didn't go till the 5th round in this mock. So you could get Devin Neal a little bit later for a steal. Caleb Johnson, just a heads up, is 6 feet tall, 225 pounds. So he can get you those short yardage situations that you want. And he's only 21 years old. I know Veach likes getting guys
that is good.
A little bit younger. So, I think that would be a solid pick for the Chiefs if they could get him.
Yeah, and listen, obviously it's just a mock draft. What we think is not the same what the teams think. Yeah. And obviously these mocks will change as they go on in the offseason. I remember when I was playing with the mock draft simulator, I was able to get Xavier Worthy with the 64th pick. We all know that didn't go that way, obviously.
After he ran the 40, because he was like kind of, end of the 2nd round guy, and then he got the record for the 40-yard dash, and then they're like, he's going to go at the end of the 1st round. So, the combine can help these guys out or hurt these guys even potentially. The Senior Bowl just happened, so some of those guys got to play there. I know some people were looking at offensive line there. So, and the free agency. We'll know more from free agency by the time the draft comes around in April. So, definitely have some more mock drafts coming out early April, I would say.
Let's answer a couple of questions while you're here. Trey says, is Bolton realistic to keep? I feel like he is a must for me. I mean, listen, there are a lot of guys that you must keep, but realistically, you can't keep everyone. We've seen it with Tyreek Hill, L'Jarius Sneed, Tyrann Mathieu, some great players who've moved on. The Chiefs have traded or let walk. Listen, if you're going to keep Bolton, I think you can only keep one between Bolton and Trey Smith from that 2021 draft class. I hate to have to say it that way, But I mean, if you keep both, it's gonna be really hard to bring in, top tier or second tier free agents after that.
Mhm.
That's how I feel about it. What do you think?
I agree with you. I think it's going to be tough to keep both of them. I will say this on KCMO Talk Radio last week before the Super Bowl, we had Lamar Hunt Jr. in studio just to talk about what the Super Bowl means to him and his family, everything like that. But it was very interesting. We had a fill-in host that day, and he asked Lamar Jr., who is your favorite Chiefs player? And without really any hesitation, he said Nick Bolton. And he said the way that he plays the game, the type of person he is off the field, he said he's just my favorite player, such a nice guy. He thought he should have won MVP against the Eagles 2 years ago in that Super Bowl when he had the touchdown, the fumble return for a touchdown. So if Lamar Hunt Jr. thinks that way about Nick Bolton, I'm not saying that Clark Hunt feels the same way about him or Brett Veach, but the way that he was talking made it seem like they're probably going to try to bring him back. I don't know if that was foreshadowing or not. I'm not saying that's inside information. I'm not saying sources here. But what I am saying is I heard Lamar Hunt Jr. say that he really likes Nick Bolton. He's his favorite player.
I did hear that. That was a really good conversation, by the way. I do encourage people to check that out on the KCMO podcast section of the website there. And by the way, I do agree. Nick Bolton should have been MVP. Want to know why? Because he got robbed a second touchdown in that game. I still stand by that to this point.
If he would have got that second touchdown, he would have got MVP.
Oh, 1000%. Here's another question. This is from Teresa. Would love to keep Hunt. Oh, it's not a question per se. I mean, listen, Kareem Hunt. I'd like for him to stay. I think he showed at 29 years old, no OTAs, no offseason, no training camp, none of that stuff. He was literally training in the hallways of a high school gym before the Chiefs gave him the call. And obviously he was recovering from surgery as well. Is he worth bringing back for another year or two? I know he's obviously got a great relationship with a lot of the guys on the team. And I think, his story, getting a second chance and being able to play in the Super Bowl is nice and all. But you don't want nice stories. You want to find a way to right the ship from that Super Bowl loss here. Do you think Kareem Hunt comes back?
I don't think so. Just, first, when it first pops into my head, I would say no. But at the same time, if they have, obviously Pacheco is still going to be here. Yeah. They're still going to need 2 more running backs. So if they're looking for a free agent running back, if there's, somebody that's about the same as Hunt, they might bring him back. We've seen him do that before. We've seen him do it with Hardman twice now. We saw him bring Juju back. They just kind of seem like a family-friendly organization where Andy Reid has those relationships kind of with his offensive coordinators too. It's very similar. Like he builds these relationships and he's like, you know what? This guy knows the offense. We can bring him back. I don't know if that's the best way to do it all the time, but if you need a third running back, let's say they draft Caleb Johnson.
Yeah.
So they'd have most likely Caleb Johnson and Isaiah Pacheco competing for the starting spot, and then Hunt would just be the third guy that comes in there if you need a, quick bruising play to keep the defense on their toes or whatever.
This is the last question, and we'll let you go here. This is from Timothy asking, what free agent could we keep signed realistically? And added it would be a short list. Just looking at this right here, this is the top free agents from over the cap. Obviously, you got some wide receivers there. I don't think the Chiefs are going to be in the market for a top tier wide receiver like a Diggs, Higgins, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, any of those guys. I mean, Zach Martin, could he possibly replace Trey Smith? Maybe.
I see a name.
Cam Robinson at left tackle from Minnesota. That would be massive. I would prefer a proven player over a rookie. I mean, Charvarius Ward, could he come back to Kansas City? He certainly has played better in San Francisco. I mean, listen, I know it's a very long list here. You see a couple of Chiefs right now as well. Is there a name here on this list that impresses you or catches your eye?
Yeah, if you scroll back up there, where did he go? Oh, yeah, Cam Robinson.
The Vikings.
Yeah, if Cam Robinson is available and the Chiefs don't want to try to go the rookie route, they did Kingsley this last year. They did Wanya Morris the year before that.
Yeah.
If they just want to go with somebody they know can play left tackle and play it well, bring in Cam Robinson. Keep working on Wanya and keep working on Kingsley. Let them, maybe even if Trey Smith has to walk, maybe you let one of those guys play guard. But yeah, I think that if you can get a proven left tackle, that's what works in the NFL.
Here's what I will say, because in that week 18 game against Denver where they lost 30-something-0, there was one bright spot in that game, and that was Hunter Norzad, who they drafted on day 3 last year from Holy Cross. He played really well in terms of his pass blocking as a center. Now his snaps were low. That's a problem. But I would not be shocked if they let Trey Smith walk and they let Hunter Norzad be the next right guard. I think that is a realistic possibility because he was able to do that in college. He did that against a great defensive front in Denver. Keep in mind, that team was trying to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I like what Hunter Norzad did in that game. I would not be upset if they decided to go about it that way, as much as I would hate to see Trey Smith go. But that would really open up the door for you to be able to sign a viable left tackle and move Tooney back to left guard. Because here's the weird part. And listen, it's not for a lack of effort. The Chiefs have tried with all these different left tackles. Orlando Brown, Donovan Smith. You mentioned Kingsley Suamataia and Wanya Morris, but nobody's working. Your best left tackle since you cut Eric Fisher is Joe Tooney. That's great, but that's far from ideal. Especially after last night where he allowed 7 pressures. I'll give you this as your last word here before we let you go. If you have any thoughts on what I just said there.
Yeah, I believe the Chiefs like a guy that can play anywhere on the offensive line, and Norzad is that guy. And when I'm doing these mock drafts too, by the way, when I'm looking at offensive linemen, if it's later, like a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick that I'm picking at the offensive line, I'm looking at guys that can play guard, tackle. They've played right tackle and then moved to left tackle maybe later in their college career, something like that, so that you can have a backup offensive tackle that can kind of just fill in if one of your guys needs to early in their career. So I honestly, in that Broncos game, it was tough for me to like fully pay attention in that game just because of, it was all the backups and everything like that. So I'm going to have to go back and actually look at Hunter Norzad. I'm going to have to like focus in on that because that's very cool that you were able to pick that out, because they look at those later round guys to try to, hey, if we can bring this guy in and play a guard, just like you said, you can save money there for the next 3 years. And we love Trey Smith. We'd like to keep him here. We'd like to keep everybody here, but it's just not possible. So that could very well happen. And as long as he's playing well and up to the task, I wouldn't hate it.
Mark, appreciate your time, man. It's been a lot of fun doing these with you during the season, and obviously we'll do more of these in the off season. Real quickly, before you get out of here, how can people check you out on KCMO Radio, and how can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, 95.7 FM in the mornings. My podcast or my weekend show just wrapped up, Sunday Sharps. Did do that all season long. Nothing in the off season there, unfortunately, but that's always fun. You can check out my Facebook page. I'm posting a little bit more there lately at Mark the Overseer. Same thing on Twitter at Mark the Overseer. So I'll try to fill in some more content there. I used to write for Chiefs on SI, but they just kind of reorganized that whole thing. And all of us who lived in Kansas City who've covered the team all season, the week before the Super Bowl, they're just like, no, we're bringing in guys who've covered the Raiders and the Jaguars. So
makes perfect sense.
Yeah, very, very odd over there at Chiefs on SI. So, I mean, you can read my old work there, but I'm not writing for them anymore. But yeah, I'm going to try to do some more posts on Facebook, I think, during the off season with my thoughts on free agency and more mock drafts. I'll post all my mock drafts up there.
But by the way, I had a chance to hang out with you at KCMO Radio Studio. It's a really great place, by the way. The location where the studio is, had no idea where it was. And then because you guys are Cumulus, and I remember Keatsman, because he's back on the radio now. I've listened to a couple of his shows, and he described the area as a radio mall. I'm like, I kind of got to hear. It's kind of like Entercom, and I know you and I both used to work there, different stations, but it kind of does look a lot like Entercom. I told you this when I was there, and I asked Mark a billion questions, and he was probably annoyed with me asking so many questions. But I love going to studio, because whenever I'm listening to a radio show, I'm always wondering, like, what does a studio look like? I've always wondered. And a lot of times these studios don't really look nice. KCMO's studio is really nice. It's honestly one of the better studios I have seen compared to A10, 610 here in Kansas City. So I'm sure you love it where you work.
Yeah.
It's great.
I used to work at Entercom, like you said, and when you walk in the lobby and you kind of see everything like all bright and beautiful there, it's very nice. But yeah, the place we're at now is just like, man, there's like a performance studio. There's this like kind of nice kitchen area. All the studios are kind of separated, soundproof. There's little off studios that you can record podcasts in and stuff. So
yeah,
man, it is really nice. Like, I gotta say.
Yeah, we'll have to talk more about that sometime. Your radio background, and because I've done some of that as well. Because I think that'd be a fun conversation. So we'll do that probably on Farscast sometime later on. Mark, I really do appreciate you once again with your time. I'll be tuning in on KCMO Radio. You're on there a lot from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. Co-hosting and producing. So we'll check you out then. Thank you again, man. You have a good night.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
All right, take care, Mark. Appreciate it. All right, that was Mark Van Sickle from KCMO Radio. Big thanks to him. Check out all of his work over at KCMO Radio. A lot of great stuff there with Pete's show, Kevin's show, and all the podcasting that he does there. So check it out if you haven't done so already. I'm seeing some of the comments here. A lot of people talking about T. Higgins. First of all, he's going to want a lot of money, especially with the type of season he had sharing the field with Jamar Chase, who obviously had the Triple Crown. He's capable. I'm not saying he can have a season just like Jamar Chase, but still a very, very good season. I do agree with Timothy. He's going to want something like Tyreek Hill, the Tyreek Hill contract. But unless you don't bring back Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins, which honestly, I think keeping Hopkins and Hollywood, first of all, it's two guys, and they're both going to be much cheaper than T. Higgins. T. Higgins, production-wise, might be better unless Hollywood stays healthy. That would be a different story. But I don't think T. Higgins would come to Kansas City. No way. Not with Kansas City and their issues. They've got to get that offensive line figured out. And listen, let's say you bring in T. Higgins, great. But I just don't trust that offensive line. You gotta fix the offensive line first before anything else. Timothy says trade for Myles Garrett. Realistically, what are you trading? What would you trade to get him? Because as great as that would be for the defense, and I think that would really help with the sack production. The bad part there is, listen, in order to get something, you have to give up something. So you would have to probably franchise tag either Bolton or Smith, and you would definitely have to throw a very high draft pick there, whether it's this year's first round pick or next year's first round pick. And the problem with the first round pick is because Kansas City picks very late every year, it's not a very enticing first round draft pick to offer to other teams. That would be the problem there, unless you can put together a really sweet package deal. But then that it would feel like you're giving up way too much for Myles Garrett. Again, he'd be awesome on this defense. He really would be. Him, Karlaftis, Jones, Turk Wharton, Mike Pennell. I love the sound of that. I really do. That's a great defensive line there, but I don't think that'll be the case here. We'll see. We'll see what Brett Veach does, but offensive line, yeah. Teresa said offense, yeah. Really gotta prioritize the offensive line here. I think ultimately, like, you gotta not waste Patrick Mahomes and his time here in Kansas City. You just can't do that. And again, I'll give the Chiefs front office a little bit of a pass here because they're not ignoring the left tackle spot. It's not been for a lack of effort. They have tried very hard to get the right guys here, and they kept thinking they got it, but I'm not sure. Trace says, how do you feel about trying to go back towards getting Snead? No, that's not realistic, Trace, because he signed a big contract, and if you're going to trade for him to get back, you would have to take on that big contract, and that's not helping Kansas City's situation. Here's what I will say. I mean, maybe the Chiefs can get a guy like Cam Robinson. That would be massive, in my opinion. But if you get a guy like Cam Robinson, I think the rest of your offseason is going to be very, very quiet. I would expect the Chiefs to make a big move on the first day of free agency within the first 48 hours. After that, I would not expect the Chiefs to do much. Kind of like last offseason. They got Hollywood Brown fairly early in the free agency period, the first wave of free agency. After that, we really didn't see the Chiefs do much at all afterwards. I'm kind of expecting that as well. I think they'll re-sign a lot of guys, but they got to restructure some contracts. I know they'll work on Mahomes. Jawan Taylor, yeah, I see your comment there, Thomas. They've got to figure something out with him because that is not working out at all. Not even close to working out. They've got a lot of things to figure out there. So, all right, covered a lot of ground here. Hopefully this is some good therapy for you guys as we move away more and more from Super Bowl 59 here. We will do another podcast. That'll be Wednesday. And then we will also have the Red Friday live chat this Friday evening. It is going to be a very cold week in Kansas City. A lot of snow coming in. So if you guys are in the Kansas City area, stay safe, stay warm, get your groceries, because I know that's a thing with a lot of people before these big storms. I've never understood it. Like, what is with people panic buying before a big snowstorm? Oh, I got to get all the eggs and milk and bread before it all goes to somebody else. Like, really? Yeah, Taylor did restructure, but I think they got to figure it out again because it's still, his cap number is still pretty big. But yeah, I've never really understood the whole panic buying before. Because it's not the zombie apocalypse. Like, this is not the freaking Walking Dead or anything. Come on. It's only going to be for a couple of days. It's okay. They're gonna clean up the streets, except for Overland Park. God forbid they do anything with all that money they have. I digress. All right, guys. I'm Farzin Vasu again. Thank you all for joining me for this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Hope you all enjoyed this. If you liked it, give it a like, comment, share, let a friend know about the podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. We will be back Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Central Time. Talk to you all then. Take care.